This is Fundraising Radio, and today's a guest speaker. We have Mayur Motgi, CEO and co-founder at Propl, that was acquired by Jawbox. And this episode, we'll talk about this acquisition, how it happened, how Propl got to this acquisition, and what Mayur sees in the startup world right now in terms of fundraising during the pandemic. So, Mayur, let's kick off by you giving us some background on yourself and on Propl.
Sure. Thanks, Constantine. So a little bit about myself. I'm Mayur Motgi. I have been in the Bay Area for the last 10 years. I've been part of 6 different startups. 5 of them have got acquired and one of them actually went public. The last few years, I've been spending more time with small businesses and independent service professionals and trying to understand how they're doing in their business and how we can help in some way in advising and getting them to grow their business and acquiring more customers. And spend a lot of time on beauty schools like Paul Mitchell, teaching these upcoming students of cosmetology and aesthetics and makeup on how to get themselves out there, show their skills, promote themselves, and in some way acquire those customers. And one of the things we realized when we talked to most of these people was they had a tough time balancing their time between managing their business and actually providing good service. So, and that's how we thought about Propel was why don't we build something, a product which actually handles the business side of it, and so that they can concentrate on more providing more quality service itself. And so we kind of envision this as being an office manager, which handles most of your appointments and scheduling and the communication between customers, and in some way provides you a timeline of what your customers have done in the past and how when they will be available for their next service and how you should communicate to them, and then in some way also help in providing them estimates and invoicing and take payments from them.
Got it. So, my first question is, it's fundraising radio, so my first question will be about fundraising for Propel. I know you haven't raised money for it. Why is that?
Yeah.
Why did you decide to not raise?
Yes. Yeah. So I'd be lying if I wasn't thinking about fundraising. I definitely was. But the question was, what time should you raise money, right? And this is very tough for startups to decide when they want to raise. A lot of people just raise free and then get even before they write this builds anything, they go and raise money. For us, it felt like we kind of come from the engineering background and we kind of build things, and which sometimes can be our downfall, but we wanted to build this initial MVP and get some sort of traction. And then once we have this free service, think about a premium service for them in terms of getting new customers and all that stuff. And for that, what we would do is we would leverage the appointment information we have gathered from the app itself. So we had built the MVP, we had decent amount of traction, and we were seeing this appointment information. In fact, I was going and sitting in these beauty salons and being the person at the reception itself and seeing what does the schedule look like? How much time does he have? If they say there's a 5-hour service, does it mean 5 hours or does it mean 8 hours? And so keeping track of all those things and seeing where are these gaps and how can eventually go and fill them. And that's where we were when actually Jawbox came knocking.
Oh, so Joe Bulk came in like really early on, right?
Yeah, so we were there for almost a year and a half, and we had built the MVP, and we had people using it. And I can go into how we actually got introduced to Jawbox itself.
Yeah,
So
let's talk about that. So, how did the acquisition happen? Did Jawbox just came in and did they just shoot you a message like, "Hey, you're building something nice, let's talk," and then it got to the acquisition part, or did you actually reach out to them yourself?
yeah, so it was a coincidence that Jim, who had worked with before in an earlier startup, had started working at Jawbox a couple of months back, and we were talking back and forth at that time, and he kind of told me about Jawbox, and I was like, this sounds very familiar. Their vision and the product they're trying to build. The biggest difference was the demographic of users they were going to was slightly different. They were more interested in the service professionals, which actually come to your house for service, and so the plumbers, the locksmiths, and the garage door salesmen, the carpet cleaners were the ones which they were concentrating on and their workflow. And we were more interested in users or businesses which are brick and mortar and people come to them and get service done. So um, Jim told me about this, and I was more curious on how Jawbox had become what it was, because it was at a hyper growth stage, and they had built a big community of users, and then we were just using that community to get and acquire more and more users. So I had a few questions for Jim, and Jim was like, "Why don't you come to the happy hour, and you can talk directly to the people there, to the operations folks, and even to the co-founders, and hear more on how they would they do things and how they actually build this specific thing." So went to their happy hour, got introduced to Shai, who is the CEO and co-founder at Jawbox, and gave him a short demo of what Propel looks like. And his first reaction was, "Hey, this is our roadmap for 2019.
Nice.
This is exactly what we want to build for 2019. How can we work together?" And it wasn't about acquisition at that time. It was more about like how can we mutually benefit from each other's product in some way, get more understanding of how things are, and in some way like share each other's secrets in what may. So and that's how and the thing I wanted most from him at that time was like, tell me how you build the community, tell me what your product looks like and all that stuff. And he was very, very frank and very, very open. And he himself had been through the stages where they had started early and they needed other people to help them out. So they were like, "What do you need from me?" And I was like, "I would love to hear more about, talk to more people and get understanding of things." And he was like, "Here's Jawbox. It's open to you. You can come in, walk by anytime. You can talk to anybody. You can sit in our meetings. You can understand how things are." And at that time, it wasn't very clear to me that this was more going towards the acquisition. It felt like it was going more towards the side where I would get more understanding of them, and then in some way help them get some of these features into their product too.
Right. Nice. And speaking of the earlier stages through which Jawbox you said, went through themselves, I'm curious, how did you manage to go through those early stages with no funding?
Yeah, so I think what we knew that if we had to build something, we didn't need, when we need money to run our servers and all that stuff, but we were most of the team were engineers and all that stuff, and I was doing most of the operation side of it and talking to the businesses and all that. So it wasn't there wasn't an urgent need for us to raise money, and what we were very clear about is we're gonna not build too much. We're gonna build the basic stuff and then see and hear more from the customers and ask them what they would need from us to make this more interesting for them, get more information from them. So it wasn't uh, it wasn't that bad in terms of getting to where we were, but we were soon getting to a stage where we are saying, "Hey, now we have this information and we can do a lot more with it. So should we raise more money and think about how we can get into more of that stuff, and then build a bigger product and see how we can actually do user acquisitions and customer acquisitions, which can go and connect to these businesses."
Nice. Yeah, that's a great stage, and I assume that's where Jawbox came in and acquired you, right?
Yes, and so at that time, and if I have to talk about how the acquisition went and all that stuff, and I think the uh, so as I spend more time in their offices and I heard talk to more people, it kind of like I kind of understood what they were talking about. They were more of talking about, "Hey, what if Propel and Jawbox was together? Hey, what if we all these features which you have on Propel was part of Jawbox itself? And what if you had a decent amount of role in the entire thing?" So until we actually got to the stage where Shai had said, "Hey, this is what I think we should do," kind of a thing. I was more of conceptualizing what would happen if Propel and Jawbox were together, and what would be the next step, and what would be the things, and without actually thinking about the acquisition itself.
hmm And how did the acquisition itself happen? So did you one day, did the co-founder of Jawbox just came up to you and, we see this as great merger, let's acquire you? Or how did you get this,
Yes,
the specific
yes,
proposal?
yes, yes. I think at that time the main question for Shai was how do we integrate this product together, and he had to be upfront and say, "This is what we think of what should happen." So Shai and I went on had lunch together and went for a walk, and then came back in the meeting and said, "Hey, this is what we think. You and your team are a great fit for this company itself, and Obviously, one of the things you have to give up is the users you have right now, because we want to concentrate on our segment of users itself, because we haven't completely done what we want to do in there. But speaking to you more and understanding of what the vision is, it feels like you and I both kind of agree on where they should go, how they should be built some way. So the question is, what if you handle a decent part of it in terms of like payments, estimating, scheduling, and onboarding and all that stuff, and give you that freedom to continue innovating in that way on that side itself, and be part of Jawbox itself. And at that time, it was all about my mind was completely racing, and it was trying to see what would we do with this company which has decent amount of resources, and we can actually use those resources to build something really interesting for their set of users itself. And at that time, the question for me was, should I wait for a year or two or to get to where Jawbox is and then start thinking of what the next stage is, or actually accelerate the vision in some way for Propel, or in a combined way, and start from thinking about what comes next? And then that feeling, that potential, just felt so much interesting to me, and having spent a decent amount of time to think about it, it just felt right. So we kind of I took some time, but after that I said, this makes complete sense. I'm super excited. I'm really grateful that you guys have been so open to me in terms of understanding what Jawbox does and how it does it, and I'm super excited what comes next.
That's really nice. And the next came acquisition, and you're still working with Jawbox, right? You're
Yes, yes.
what's your role there? I'm just curious.
Yes. So right now, so they have a product, right, which actually handles the workflow
Hmm.
for these service professionals itself, and then there are different aspects of it and how they get jobs and they get completed. They go to the customer and get stuff done, and we handle most of the things related to like scheduling, providing an invoice, an estimate, actually going and accepting payments with on site itself, and also in terms of onboarding and making sure that we have the right kind of people, and doing all the user vetting and making sure that these people are the people they're saying, and they provide the right documentation for us. And so we kind of build that aspect of the whole thing, and it's been great. It's been amazing, because we feel like things would have been a lot slower if we were doing the same thing at Propel right now.
Right, right. Great. I mean, congrats on the acquisition. Sounds like it went really smoothly and really organically. So really nice work there. And here I want to move on to what happens after the acquisition in terms of you personally. So on our pre-interview call, you mentioned that you were doing some angel investing as well, right? Can you
Yes.
talk a little bit about that?
Yes, so I've been part of the Stanford Angels and Entrepreneurs group itself, and through that, been doing some angel investing, and I've been part of um, Alchemist Accelerated Ventures in terms of being the mentor and investor in that case also. And I think the emphasis is, again, is more on advising and connecting to people who can benefit from my experience in in a lot of ways. And so and in the past some time also, I've seen that there are a lot of people who want advice and who want to get to a stage where they can leverage most of the existing tools itself. And for me, it's more of how I can be of help to them and how I can actually advise them, and if required, be invest in some way, and especially when they're in like the early stages of the company itself.
Mm-hmm. Got it. So let's talk about coronavirus. So right now, when this pandemic is up there, no one really knows what's going to be at the end of this pandemic, if it's even going to end. What do you still invest in, or do you just wait for the dust to settle? So what's going on?
Yeah, yeah. So one of the things which is common between companies like Slack and WhatsApp and Pinterest and Instagram and Uber and Venmo is they either raised or launched in the last recession. So it would it it it'd be foolish of me to say that the company's not going to do well after they're done with the pandemic. So what we are, obviously, we're doing more diligence and trying to understand what kind of companies are out there, and talking to them and helping them, and seeing playing the waiting game and saying, hey, I really like what you have, but I would want to see you here, and we can help you get there. We can give you these kind of resources in some way to get there. And if we feel like you are doing those steps and all that stuff, we will be more happy to talk more and get into investment.
Right, nice. So on our pre-interview call again, you mentioned that you're looking for this like really sound business model to invest money in that company. What does it mean to have a sound business model?
Yeah, and I think one of the things which has become pretty oh, clear right now is everybody's thinking about conserving cash right now. So they all want to extend their runway. They all want to think about how they can survive in some way, which is okay. But I think they should be thinking more about how they can thrive in this pandemic itself. But the one thing which comes like front and center now when you're trying to raise money is how are you going to generate revenue? How are you going to make sure that you are are not playing this game where you're just burning a lot of cash and then at some point of time you'll start thinking about revenue. So that has to be the first thing you think about. So in terms of like deciding on what is your business model and why your users will use it and whether they're ready to pay for it has become more and more critical now.
Right. So another thing that I personally heard a lot in terms of investors being willing to invest versus not is if the company is doing something essential or nice to have, as they say. How do you? So what's your personal view on this? Can you give me a couple of examples of something
Yes.
essential and something
Yeah.
nice to have? So that
Yeah. Yeah. So I was just thinking about this. Like, what if I had to start Propel right now, right? And what would it be the biggest difference? And I think, and the reason why Propel would be, it might be in trouble right now because the businesses which we are catering to are struggling, right? Because
right,
all
right.
people, yeah, people don't want to go to a salon right now. People don't want to go and meet people. So, but what I could also think about at that time is people at some point want to go to get a haircut. They want to get their nails done, but they want to spend as little time possible in the office. They want to go in there, not wait at all, and get it done. So, what makes that critical? The way that we can make that happen is if we have a sound appointment system, wherein we are very clear to the customer from the beginning itself. Your appointment is at 9 a.m. You will be out of there by 9:30. We will not make you wait at all. It won't be more than 2 minutes of wait, and you will be out as soon as it's done, kind of a thing. So this is just an example of how we can actually cater the thing around it itself. One of the things Yelp has done right now is in all their businesses, they have a badge saying we are COVID prepared. We are doing these things. We are sanitizing. Similar to Airbnb, also is doing the same thing. And they're saying their hosts are clearly saying that we have cleaned up things and making it safe for you to come in and that stuff. So um, the former example I mentioned in for Propel is a part wherein you're being proactive about the changes which are happening in the society itself and saying, I'm going to leverage that and build things which will take advantage of that and provide services which are becoming more and more critical now. The latter is more of like making sure that the users who are or the businesses which are trying to uh, provide a service on my platform, they are giving enough information to the customers to make them safe enough to come to their business itself.
Right, right. That's a pretty good description of how business can transit themselves and adjust themselves to the coronavirus. So thanks for that. And going back a little bit towards your personal preferences, what do you think are the three must-have points on the pitch deck, especially now during coronavirus? Do you think one of those must-have points must have something to do with coronavirus or not really?
It would be nice to talk about it, but I think for me the three most important things, and this hasn't changed too much since the pandemic, is the first one. The most important thing for me is the team, seeing how each team member contributes to the success of the product or will contribute to the success of the product. So if we see a team which can actually has all the pieces required to build this thing, we feel like yeah, they are good. They have the recipe for success, and we will continue. They will continue on their right path itself, and they have the best chances. I mean, we can never say anything for sure, but at least we know that they have enough pieces in there to make it successful. And for the second and third part, I usually think of it as like starting a company is like writing a book, wherein you first think about the first chapter and you think about the last chapter. So, and when the last chapter essentially like what is the grand vision of this company? Where would this company want to be if we were successful? What would the success look like for it? And then once you have that, you start thinking about the first chapter itself, and then saying, what would be my first concrete step to make make something out, release something out there, and see how I can actually get enough traction, enough understanding, so that I can actually start my journey. And the chapters in between are just your journey till the end.
Right. That's good. And having a sound team is probably the most important part of the company. So you're completely right here. And we're moving on to the last couple questions. One of them is, what kind of companies do you like to mentor? So you mentioned that you're doing, some investments, but mainly you're doing mentoring for the companies. What kind of companies do you generally mentor? So is there some specific field that you focus on, or?
Yeah, I think I kind of have divided my advising and mentoring in two types of companies. And one, companies are the traditional tech companies itself, and some companies who can actually leverage from my experience in payment scheduling, user acquisition strategies, and onboarding. So that still remains. And companies which are early in the stage, which want to understand how would I go about doing this, how would we provide in terms of this, and what are the existing tools available I can use without actually kind of reinventing the wheel in some way. And the second kind of businesses are actually the brick and mortar small business itself, and spending a lot of time with people and seeing how they're getting affected by the pandemic and how they can actually um, uh, make changes to their business so that they can do well. So the example I can take is recently I worked with a physiotherapy center in the greater LA area, which were completely dependent on their customers coming to their studio and getting physiotherapy and stuff done. And their average age of customers was like 55. And there is no way in any of they would want to come back to the studio as they were doing before. So what we did was we helped bring their entire um, and classes on online using an existing learning management system itself. So now they are running all their classes online. It they actually have one-on-one consultations with their patients, and we get all that stuff done. So thinking about more and how we leveraging some of these tools which we in the Silicon Valley take for granted, and providing them to these smaller businesses so that they can actually continue to not just survive but to actually thrive in this state.
Nice. Yeah, that's a really nice implication of something that Silicon Valley comes up with. So last question for today's episode is going to be call to action. So what's the one thing that you want the listener to do as soon as the episode is over?
Yeah, I would say reach out to me on LinkedIn, and I'm very very active on LinkedIn, and I'm very prompt in replying to people. So if you want to have a chat, if you want to understand, want me to understand what you're doing and how I can be of any help to them, reach out to me. I will definitely make sure that we spend some time together. And I give you my thoughts and give you feedback on how things could be, and even potentially think of how we can be involved in terms of investment and all that stuff sometime.
Perfect. I'll definitely make sure to leave a link in the description of this episode. So anyone who wants to talk to Mayur, highly recommended, by the way. Check out the description of this episode. There's going to be a link to Mayur's LinkedIn. And my personal call to action will be go to the description of this episode. I'll leave another link to the Patreon, so our custom channel, where we have nice articles with summaries of multiple speakers actually talking about one subject. So like there is recently an article that went out about how 5 different investors source their deals. So like if you want to figure out how to get in touch with those investors organically, that's the article for you. So call to action, go to the description of this episode and take a look at the links. We'll wrap it up here and have a great day, everyone.